So, welcome back for episode 2 in the Write That Book series, which is purely the concoction of the fertile brains of Liz Solar and me, who had a conversation and said, this would be an interesting topic to do an event. And Liz says, I know spectacular people to join this as a panel discussion. So we decided to do it. And we have now, this being the second, it's now a series of special events that I plan to do on the 4th Wednesday of each month in this time slot. And if there's a topic that is of interest to you that you think would be of interest broadly to the business world, then I'd love to discuss it and figure out how we might produce it. So with that, I want to hand it over to Liz Solar, who has worked with our panelists to chart a course of conversation loosely. And they all have deep experience within the world of producing books that sell. And this session is going to focus more on the audio portion of production. Liz, with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, and I'm going to spotlight all of the panelists so the rest of us go away and the video will be better. All right, over to you.
Terrific. Thanks, John. And thank you for everybody who is participating in the discussion and all the guests who I hope also participate in the discussion. We're here to talk about audiobooks, which is probably the fastest growing genre of books going, although, and I did not realize this, and I love curling up with a good old paperback or hardcover book, but I think it was Tom who turned me on to the fact that book sales, traditional book sales, were up 9% last year. It's somewhere in that neighborhood. Audio also growing really quickly. So if you are in that space of thinking about writing a book or thinking about writing a book, or you already have one, audio is a great thing to consider. It's a double your pleasure, double your fun proposition that you're going to probably sell. You're going to sell in both genres or both formats. You're going to widen your sphere of influence and therefore your followers, people who are potential buyers. There's lots of great reasons to record an audiobook, and we're going to get into all of those reasons. And as I introduce you, please tell the people about yourself. Sherry, I'm going to start with you this time and talk about what's your number one reason for writing an audiobook or recording an audiobook, and what's your experience with that? And just tell us a little bit about yourself before you start.
Oh, okay. I've been a ghostwriter for many years and I've written over 150 books now. It's closer to 200 now, 5 on Amazon's bestseller list. And as far as audiobooks go, I started doing that several years ago when a company hired me to record the audiobooks for the NFL and the NBA, actually, the National Basketball Association. And so that led to all sorts of audiobooks, from cookbooks to memoirs, novels, that sort of thing. A lot of books in nutrition, because I am a sports nutritionist, so I could maybe convey the content a little bit better if needed. And that was a big bugaboo with me on getting an audiobook. When they would send me the manuscript, it had to be edited. And if it wasn't, then I would offer my editing services, get that done, and I make sure I would do that thoroughly before starting recording. But it was fun. I did that with the same company for, I want to say almost 15 years.
Sure, because we're going to get into another specific conversation around this, but I do want to keep this in memory right now, is that I'm intrigued that you were hired to read books, to narrate books about the NFL, and I think the other one was the NBA. Are those the correct letters? So I want to get back to that because that feels material to our conversation as well. While we're ruminating in the back of our minds about that, I want to go to Michael Coleman, who is a voice actor and an audio guy and who also wrote a book, and your experience with doing both.
Well, for me, I've worked in radio for about 40 years, and I've also done audiobooks for other people. I found that Liz will agree with me that a lot of times I will write my own scripts, but they're done at 30 seconds, 60-second intervals. This was a lot more writing. And fell into that room, my God, I'm a writer now. This is great. But over the years, I would really enjoy creating the commercial, the writing part of it. In my mind, after I wrote it, oh, it's over. It's done. Because it was so automatic for me to do the voiceover and the production for it. It was already completed. I'm like, oh, that's right. I have to get this done now and remind myself. But that would be so quick. And I found that, again, it's all these different mediums that are out there. I think the easiest, you're looking at a movie, you're looking at television. Everything is presented to you within this screen right here. The book is so vast. You have theater of the mind. We create any character. If I told you without seeing the movie Cuckoo's Nest, you wouldn't look at R.P. McMurphy as Jack Nicholson. You would envision him as a totally different character. Same thing as name the main character in that. But now you have, everything has changed when you see that's why the book is always better than the movie, because of theater of the mind.
Getting to Michael, there's a different experience about writing a book and then narrating your own words. Talk about that experience in terms of what it did for you. Did you find that it found a greater audience, a bigger platform?
It only because, well, I was getting to that. The entire paradigm, it is shifted to another level. If it's the right voice, you could be a phenomenal writer. And you can have a voice, and it might be a really unappealing voice. And that's when you have to figure out, if someone has to tell you, you're not the voice for this. You need an actor. You don't need a voiceover person. There's a big difference between a disc jockey. Hi, how are you? Imagine Cuckoo's Nest, R.P. McMurphy. Nurse Ratched, you shouldn't come over. We don't need medication for this patient. It sounds great, but where's the acting involved? Where's the feeling? Where's the empathy in that? The paradigm has totally changed, but more people are listening. A lot of people don't read. Now, they don't have the time. They don't make the time to read. They want to be in their car. They want to be entertained. They don't want to hear the radio anymore. They don't want to listen to commercials. They would rather hear that story. You could hear a whole book from driving from here to New York, from driving from Boston to New York City. You probably hear 2 or 3 books in it. So people want their information now. Audiobooks are really, I believe, a much better way to go if there is an alternative to reading, because some people have trouble reading. Some people have that AD where they reread a page and they get caught up in the book or they're just reading words after a while. Everyone's different, but I find that society less and less are actually reading the book, where it's an integral part. If you write a book, you must have an audiobook.
Yeah, and Yvonne or Tom, or both of you, can probably speak to what Michael's mentioning about the portability of the audiobook, and what does that mean? Because for some people, they don't really see that there's a distinction, one or the other. I find sometimes both. I love the reading part, but what are some of the advantages of having your book in audio?
You want me to go first? I can tell you, Liz, that the up and coming generations especially are reluctant to buy a print book and then sit somewhere and read it. They're on the go, they're hiking, they want to listen while they're doing laundry, taking a walk, in their car, as Michael said. They want to be entertained. And so their form of entertainment, if it can't be video, then it's going to be audio. And so if we look at the professional people that Tom and I work with, that we tell them all the time, yes, you should create an audiobook. Those people they're looking for the content to be delivered in a way that's easy for them to assimilate. And so they might buy the print book because they still like that. And often people will do that. They will buy both the print book and then they will buy the audiobook because they just like having that print book on their bookshelf. And they might want to go back and make comments in it or underline or something like that. But the audiobook gives them power it delivers the content the way they want it delivered. And so if you're writing a book today and you're not including an audiobook, you're leaving money on the table. And Tom can talk a little more to that.
Yeah, Tom, I wish you would.
Yeah, Yvonne said it that I don't have specific stats on it, but I know I've read that there a significant number of people who buy audiobooks also buy the print book. But the advantages of audio for busy people are pretty obvious. They can, while they're on the treadmill, while they're in the car, they can still get their reading in. In doing some research for this, the print book market is, and this is in unit sales, so it's not skewed by pricing. The print book is still upwards of 3/4 to 80% of the total units sold are print books. But on the other hand, both ebooks and especially audiobooks, which is the fastest growing, are growing faster than the print book market. And to pick up on what Michael was saying, among the reasons for not being your own reader is the time commitment. People think that they're just going to hop on a mic and read the book. It's a challenging thing to do. The estimates are it's going to, for however long the final recording is, it'll be at least 3 times that in getting it read into digital form. And what most people then don't realize is that you're not even close to being able to put that up on the internet for sale, because platforms like Audible have very demanding specifications for the audio file that they will accept and sell. It's their reputation that's on the line. There are a lot of reasons to get help, especially with the narration part.
I really like that both Liz and Michael said actors as opposed to just someone to read the book, because that is what people think. They think the audiobook is you just sit down and you read it. And the authors often think, I wrote it, so I'm the best person to read it. And this is not true, because you do need an actor, someone who understands how to get into the story and tell the story and not have all the distractions, the ums, the ahs, the things that are going to then spend more time on the technical end, which what Tom does, taking the ums and ahs out and things like that. So having a voice actor do your audiobook is a much better guarantee of success.
And if you look at your book as your brand, a product, there are very few people who will advertise their own brand unless you risk being embarrassed, or every once in a while it works for you where you establish this kind of quirky persona. But for the most part, I think it works against you, and your brand doesn't have to be you. Your brand could be somebody representing you. And so it's really important to see that this is it's a business. Writing is a business. Yeah. Audio is a business. Producing that work is a business. So not only having a little bit more information about how to deliver that book orally or through audio, it's also looking at this process as project management. And I think, Michael Azevedo, you can speak a little bit, probably at length, to what it takes in terms of putting together project management of a book or any long form project like this. I know both Yvonne and Tom are involved in it, but you are as well.
Yeah, just as an audiobook narrator, and Sherry, you actually mentioned this in your comments earlier. I first mostly started doing audiobook narration. It was a bit of a COVID pivot for me. But one of the phenomenon I encountered was receiving manuscripts that were just essentially unreadable. I could not in good conscience read them word for word, but it's also an opportunity to double dip. I'll be your copy editor and then I'll be your VO person. Now, I will say everything I was reading was within one of two genres, either broadly speaking, the self-help genre and then business 101 kind of stuff. And it was all third person, it wasn't super important for me to embody the narrator. But from a project management standpoint, I found that from my own project management needs, taking the time to, first you got to do a read through of the book to get a sense of the tone, to get a sense of the vocabulary level, essentially. And then you do the read, and then you got to go back and do the edit. And if you're working with more than one title, then you do really have a time management challenge on your hands. But I think with working with, if you're a voice actor and you're working with authors, I don't really necessarily feel like it's a binary in the sense of that the author should read their book or the author shouldn't read their book. I think a lot of it depends on the story that's being told. And does the story lend itself to more emotion-driven, quote unquote, acting, or is it more of a form of storytelling that would fit with the subject matter? Liz, am I answering the question that you were?
Yeah, perfectly. Because I want to go back to Sherry because of something she said, and two notable authors that I really enjoyed listening to. One was James Clear, his Atomic Habits book. He was brilliant, and he really knew how to adapt the written book into an audio form too, because there are certain things, if it's a footnote or an asterisk, you have to be able to finesse that. He was also good at finessing, hey, and if you have more questions on this, there's a download on my website, atomichabits.com. So he was really maximizing the utility of his book and even growing that audience, followers, even further by having everything relate back to his website. And also Ann Patchett did a great job. I think it was Truth and Beauty. She wrote a memoir about a friend, and I could have listened to her all day. So I totally agree with you, Michael. It's really not whether it's a voice actor or the author, it's the right voice for the right project, which leads me back to Sherry, who did these books on NFL and NBA, because my background, as well as Mike Coleman's, is radio. And back in the day, they'd say, we can't hire any more girls. We already have one, because people like to listen to men. They want to buy from men. So there was that thinking, and that's certainly not true anymore. And I'm wondering, Sherry, how were you able to sell somebody on reading something that is traditionally a male domain?
Yeah, that was a surprise for me as well. I got to be honest, I remember I got to get the labels right. So I started with the NBA, and they had me read the memoirs of some of their most famous players. Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant. I did 3 of Kobe Bryant books, Kevin Durant, etc. And each time I did it, they liked what I did, and so they just send me the next one, and it just snowballed and just kept going. Now, the book I'm writing right now for the NFL, this might be a different one where when I was talking to Michael about it on his podcast, I'm thinking Michael would be good for this particular project for the NFL one. Not that I've always thought when you watch women hosting the NFL or they're not calling the plays, but they're interviewing the players and stuff like that. And I always thought, and they would comment on something that the team player did. And I was like going, yeah, but how can you relate to that, to what they're going through out there on the field? I've always thought that. But anyways, they like the women voice on that.
And maybe it has to do with the intention. What role are you playing in that book? Who are you? If you're trying to channel that person, it's unlikely that you're ever going to be, if it's a male, that you're ever going to really channel that.
Yeah.
So it might be, here, I'm telling you something historically. Think of Smithsonian or the old A&E or any type of documentary. You're basically a historian, or you're the recorder of events. So if you put that in your mind, and perhaps that's what you did, you told it as the story about someone else. And I'm really just pointing out that the highlights of their career or their lives. So a lot of it is, what intention are you coming in with? If you're reading a medical book and it's for other doctors, you're going to have a different approach than if you're talking to the rest of us who just really want to simplify the medical language, the jargon, and be more human with us. So we're always creating within that a character. And if you've written the book and you can fully embody that character and be persuasive and are easy to listen to, I say more power to you.
Yes. I think part of it, each one of the books included their workouts, what they did to get where they got. And I've been a personal trainer and instructor for 30 years. So I understood a lot of that. So I had to bring a lot of energy. Frankly, they put me to shame because I'm like, oh my gosh, their workouts were insane to get prepared for whatever game it was, or even auditioning or to get to the next level. So that was fascinating. And I could say what they did in a realistic format where I got what they were doing. I understood the exercises that they were doing. So I think that helps. So I had to bring a lot of energy. I agree with getting off a little bit on when Yvonne said about the character and having a voice actor. I remember I got asked to narrate a novel and she was insistent on me doing it. And I was like, okay, but I had to come up with a Southern accent for one of the characters. And I was like, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? I'm from Detroit. I just had no idea how I was going to do that. But I lived in Texas for 22 years and I just drew from my neighbor who came over and introduced herself. How y'all doing? And I just narrated and brought her into case. So anyways, that was how I got through that. But I realized then that I prefer doing nonfiction books for narrating. Doing the characters is tough. You really got to pay attention.
So one of the things that I'm curious about with voiceover actors, and it came up in a conversation I had yesterday with a gentleman who was talking to me about his book. How in the nonfiction area do you charts and graphs? Where does that fit in if a business book has charts and graphs?
Yes. Do you want me to address that? Because I had to.
Good. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that was tough. And there were many charts, actually, including the workouts. Sometimes they would have that and it would be in a chart form. And so I had to read every single one. And when I asked them about it, I just read the chart, basically took them through the chart as if I were reading the chart myself. So that's how I did it. But yeah, charts and graphs are tough.
Is there a way, do you think, and Tom, Yvonne, since you have the most experience with this, is there a way to speak to authors and say, hey, you're translating this from the written word to the spoken word. How do we do this so it's not as wonky? Because we look at things and we absorb that visual information, but walking someone through that feels tedious. And I don't think that we want to turn someone off in the middle of a chapter so they go done with this, because that can feel boring to me.
Yeah, Tom?
I would guess that what you said earlier, Liz, about James Clear might be the current easiest workaround, which is to have people download the actual charts and graphs, have them available on your website in a easy to find place. On Michael's website, we put a resources page because his book is full of exercises that people can walk through, worksheets and so on. And so, yeah, when the audiobook comes out, I would assume that the same thing. He'd refer to it, maybe give people a little bit of guidance on how to complete an exercise. It's probably an entirely new and additional format for books, but I think video is probably going to become part of it at some point.
Yes.
In your experience, Tom, how would you advise somebody who's thinking of putting together an audiobook, recording their book, or having someone else do it? What are good questions to ask on the audio end and on the voiceover end? How do you persuade somebody who probably shouldn't read their own book to hire someone to do it? What should they be asking people? What type of answers should voice actors be giving to make what they do more palatable? Because it's an expense. It's an expense to hire a voice actor.
Yeah, we came across a new to us anyway, a company that is offering to do AI generated narration. It's hard for me to even imagine that's a good idea, but yeah, I think people really need to ask themselves, are they willing to invest the time? That may be too ego-driven. You should at least point out the question of whether their voice is the right voice. But it's a big time commitment. Now, James Clear, that's how he markets himself, is putting his material out there. He invests a lot of his time in his blog and has for years. Yeah, and then the other aspect is, do they want to take the time before they get to the production end to become a sound engineer? It is, I think one of the easiest things is send them to the ACX page where they list their specifications and let them look at the gobbledygook numbers and labels and so on and say, do you understand all this? Are you going to be able to meet these specifications? So those are some of the questions I think that might persuade somebody that they really do need help.
And anybody here besides Tom have some experience with using AI in books or have explored that?
I've explored it just in terms of trying to get a sense of, at its most sophisticated, what the difference in the sound is. In fact, I did say the equivalent of an audio blind taste test, a listening test with some folks, and said, tell me which is human and which is AI, and they couldn't.
Really?
And this was good AI, I have to say. It's an offering through Apple.
Apple has some great AI voices. How long did you listen to those voices?
The allowable clip, I think, was like 30 to 60 seconds at most, probably closer to 30.
I think you can make anything sound close to human in 30 to 60 seconds. I know that there are some commercials being produced like that, but can you do it?
Liz, I think that it's close to human, but these AI libraries are built off of the human voice. So it actually, it's a composite of everything that person has said. They just didn't say it in that way or in that order, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, we have an AI video on our website. It's very short when you land on the homepage. And I found that the voice of the man was much closer than the voice of, there's a woman and a man in the video. And the man, if you're not paying attention and you're not looking, you could think it was an actual person. But the voice of the woman, no. You immediately could tell that
It's
was
interesting. The video is cartoon avatars talking, and for me, it fit in perfectly that they were AI generated. It almost added to the message that don't take everything too seriously.
I'm not saying that, Tom. I'm just saying that to listen to it, it's quite clear that whether it was a avatar or not, but the voice, the woman's voice did not.
I'm sorry, what I meant to do is draw a distinction. If you're writing a nonfiction book to market yourself and your business, you don't want to come across as not too serious. So yeah, I think human voice, I suspect if you sent a chapter from your book to this Apple AI, and the first cut reading would not be even close to the samples that they're giving you to brag about the quality of the voice. That's just my guess.
There are some issues around AI in terms of ACX. We all know is particular about their formatting, and it seems that some AI just is not acceptable.
The company that I mentioned, if you read their little Q&A, if you buy the $3,500 AI version of your book, it will only be sold on Kobo. What's embedded in there is that they know that their AI can't meet the ACX specs.
Why is that? Because I would think it's an enriched MP3. I don't understand what the processing that's used. Maybe Michael Coleman can speak to this in terms of audio production. Tom, maybe you know a little bit more about it.
Go ahead, Michael.
Look, as far as AI, maybe because I've been in audio so long, I can tell the difference. And it's advancing. every day. It's going to get better. And I can tell the difference between good AI and poor AI. But whether it's inflection, resonance, there's just that one little point, that one little pause that for me, it just doesn't click in. I don't know if I can answer that question though, because that's me. So many people out there that they can't tell the difference. And who is the main audience now? It might be these people who don't have that trained ear. I don't know really how to answer that.
I think if we're looking at the totality of the book and an AI voice, I'm sure it can replicate or do well with some of the book, with just like especially in nonfiction, it can read correctly. But when there's a story and
Yes.
you need the emotion and you want the reader to feel engaged in part of that story, having someone just reading it is not going to work. So the AI is going to fail when it comes to that.
Yeah, I always look at empathy for the listener, empathy for the reader, empathy for the person that whatever I'm writing about. Empathy is huge. What position are they in when they are hearing this? What are they doing when they're reading this? Where's their mindset? And you might have a 50, if there's 100 at one time that are reading the same book or listening to the same book, you get to put them all in different categories because they're not going to, you do public speaking or comedy or whatever. The audience is vast. It's so many different, so many different equations that go into the storyline. Now, especially if it's fact, these are the facts. You're explaining nonfiction or historical events. That's one thing. There's information that's coming in. You're doing fiction. You're doing an emotional story in there. This is where the director, the lighting, the actors have to be great at it. And like I said earlier, you take any story, your favorite book, To Kill a Mockingbird or whatever, but if you put other actors involved there, voice actors or visual actors in there, it's going to make or break that storyline. It could ruin it. So many movies out there were bombs maybe they didn't sell, but they were great movies. But why? I don't know. Maybe they didn't have star quality. Now you get into AI again, where I find now, and again, I'm praying that I'm wrong, but I think there's just such what I call a mess age of over communication. And I don't think people know what's good anymore. Really don't know where that real quality is until they read more, until they listen.
Feel it, Michael, I work in nonfiction quite a bit, and I like to tell my readers, or my writers rather, that when they're telling a story, they have to bleed on the page a little bit. They have to show the emotion. They have to cry. I want to see the teardrops. The people reading the book or listening to it, they want to feel what the author felt. And an AI cannot do that. Even if it comes off with a wonderful sounding voice that's very human, it still cannot bleed on the page because it doesn't have any blood.
Those are great. I'm going to be a little bit of a contrarian here because I was in, I think it was a clubhouse session, and there was an audio guy that I respect wholeheartedly, and we were talking about how we get information and can we tell the difference and does it matter? And he is totally about using live voice actors. And he said he was going to YouTube and he was listening to a couple of different, tutorials, and he knew that they were AI voices and he didn't care because he was getting the information. So what both you, Yvonne, and Mike alluded to is that do we care? Can we tell the difference? Yes, no. Do we care if we can? And some people who are just mining whatever it is for information, and maybe that comes to knowing who your reader is and tailoring, whether it's your written book or your audiobook, for that particular listener. Maybe for some people, it will never make a difference. Yeah, that's okay. They're droning on. I don't care. I'm just
I
listening.
hear
for
what you're
information.
saying, Liz. I hear what you're saying. And there are a lot of people who are not concerned with quote unquote the quality if it's an AI voice. However, I go back to the fact that unless it's just the facts, ma'am, and I go back to that old Dragnet show where he used to say, just the facts, ma'am. He didn't want you to elaborate or any of that. If it's just the facts, that's fine. But again, they want story. If you're in the story, and this goes for fiction primarily, the listener, regardless, wants to hear that voice. It has to be the right voice and the right character, which a voice actor will be able to do. Maybe the author wouldn't. And in nonfiction, again, I go back to where a lot of the people I work with, they have chapters where it's really just the facts, where they're citing something, where they're trying to make a point or teach, but then they get into the story. And Michael does this really well. He gets into the stories about how the nuns hit him with the rulers. An AI is going to read that the same way they read the facts. And I think it will make a difference. To some people, it never will. You can't please everyone. And to your point about writing and speaking to the audience that you're serving, absolutely. You have to always look at who is the person that this is being created for and what do they expect.
On my second book that's coming out, I have one chapter, it's called The Future of Messaging, and I talk about text to speech conversion, which is basically AI. And what I'm saying is, look, you've come all this way. You've bled on the page, as Yvonne said. You poured your soul out onto this paper. And now you want to go the cheap route and have a machine do your voice for you. Now, I don't care how great it is. I don't care how great the voice actor is. I keep saying this. You have the greatest voice on the planet. John Facenda for the NFL, Sherry, was the voice that I grew up with. That made me fall in love with the NFL, was this deep, dulcet voice. This was the voice of God. And he sold their story to me, along with phenomenal writing. He could have just talked about, he tackled them on the ground. It was like, okay, that was great. But it took you maybe a few yards in that. But this is, okay, you wrote it in blood. And now you're going the cheap route. Because really, what is the purpose of AI? Is to save you time and money. That's pretty much it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so I don't know, Liz, I'd love to circle back again to a little bit to why is it necessary?
If you have a heavy Brooklyn accent or talk from Queens or something like that, and you're writing from where you are and all this, it's yes, you got to be that voice, or you have to get someone to be that voice. But
yeah, like Sherry said, she had to be Southern. I don't know that I could do it, Sherry. I say all the time, and I write all the time, hey, y'all, because I have relatives that are from, but that's about the extent of my ability to talk like somebody from the South. But what I was saying, Liz, is I think it's important really to talk about the necessity of the audiobook. How the audiobook is done is extremely important because the voice and the technology have to play together so you can get it up on ACX and other platforms so people can access it. But if you're an author today and you're already put together this team of editors and designers and all the things that go into actually writing the book, thinking about the audiobook becomes a little bit like overwhelmed. Do I have to do that? Can I wait a year till I recover from writing the book because it's such a big job? And my answer is no, you can't. But what do other people think?
That's an excellent point, and I'd love for you to pursue that, Yvonne, because the timing is everything. And there are people who have waited a year and a half, and it feels like an afterthought.
Yeah, you're
And-
leaving money on the table if you aren't launching your audiobook with your print book. Because again, as we said earlier, people want the print book, but they're going to buy the audiobook also because that's the convenience. To Michael's point, it's going to save them time. It takes time to sit down and actually read a print book page by page. You have to be in a quiet place. I read when we watch TV. It does take more effort. So people want to have the option. So you need to give them, here's the print book, here's the ebook, because let me tell you, Kindle is very popular. Ebooks are still even a little more popular than audio at this point, and then the print. And so if you're offering everyone these options, because as we said earlier, I can't remember, Tom, maybe Michael, the other Michael, both Michaels said people read and absorb information differently. This is the key. People absorb information and they want the choice, and you're not giving them the choice. You're both leaving money on the table, and you're leaving a question mark in some people's minds. Are you really serious about this? Because you're not giving me it in the form that I want to consume it.
What are the questions, and go around the circle? What questions should a potential or an actual author ask themselves before they get into marketing this audiobook slash, traditional book? Because as much as we're talking about how difficult it is to write it, and then now I have to read it and perform it, but the promotions are huge. And I think even in self-publishing, or people who think about self-publishing, I think many unsuspecting authors feel that someone's going to do the heavy lifting of promoting and marketing for them. And that comes with the price tag. But it's also, to be real, most authors are doing, even at very high levels, even established authors are doing their own marketing. Could you give like a little first aid kit for perhaps the newly indoctrinated authors in terms of how to bundle all of that?
Do you want us to start? I'm sure Sherry.
Yeah,
also.
I'd like to go around, starting with you because you're here, Yvonne, and we'll go to Tom, Sherry, Michael.
Yep.
Michael.
I'll tell you, they need to start marketing the book before they start writing the book. As soon as they have the idea. Now, here's the big key there. As soon as they have the idea and they can put it out that they're starting a book, this makes them accountable. So people who do this are more likely to finish their book, because now they've told the whole world that this book is coming. I recommend that they start thinking about a mock cover. It does not have to be the final cover of the book, but they want a mock cover so people have something to look at. I tell authors, pull things right out of the content you're writing and put it out there and say, from chapter 3, this point is necessary because, and then tell me why. And now I've seen something that's already in the book. They have to also think about who's going to be their beta reader. They need a group of beta readers, and the beta readers get the unfinished or the uncorrected galley proof. So in other words, it's just the final manuscript, but it still needs another run for editing and whatnot. But they get this, and maybe you ask them to read 2 or 3 chapters because everyone's busy. Maybe they can't read all 250 pages. And then you ask them to give you a testimonial, then those go inside the book. So we have multiple ways. We have a couple of books that we've written about how to market yourself in your book. And the key point there is how to market yourself. Because when you're an author of anything, you're selling you. You are selling you to me. And if I like you, then I'm going to go buy your book. So don't get heavy-handed on the buy my book. In fact, I did a video for LinkedIn on this where I basically said, stop selling your book. Stop throwing your book at me. I'm tired of looking at your book. Send me something else. Why do I need the book? What's it going to do for me? So when you get into the mode of just talking and sharing and using education as a tool to support the book, then people are going to be eager to read the book and buy the book. You have to start before the book is published.
Yeah. Liz,
Yvonne, you gave out a lot. I'm sorry, Tom. After Tom, I'd like to open it up because I'm realizing now we only have a few more minutes and I want to hear what you have to say, Tom, but let's turn it over to our audience afterwards so they can ask a few questions before we wrap.
All right. When you were asking the question, it went back to something we were doing in the chat. So this relates. It was Frederick who asked about recovering the costs. And it occurred to me when you were asking the question that, especially for a fiction book, the audiobook, you could excerpt a piece out of the audiobook and use that to create a video trailer for the book. So the audiobook becomes part of the marketing for the print and the ebook and the audiobook. And I've seen it, like I said, especially with fiction. We do trailers. We try to get our authors to do trailers for their books. Especially with fiction, the reading from the book is frequently the audio track for the video trailer.
Yeah, great point. Take a cue from the old movie trailers. They don't really do that much of that anymore, giving story away, but it's mostly special effects. So does anybody, Maria or Frederick or Tom, have any questions for Michael, Sherry?
I had one question, or just I'm curious if anybody else in the group has encountered this sort of phenomenon. A month or so ago, I interviewed this highly sought after award-winning audiobook narrator named Edoardo Ballerini. And the list of the books that he has, like best-selling nonfiction novels rather, that he has narrated is almost inexhaustible. But he's recently collaborated with an author named Jess Walter. And Jess Walters has got a bunch of bestsellers under his belt, but he wanted to collaborate with this guy Ballerini and go right to audiobooks. So there's not going to be a print version of this novel. It's going there. So they're skipping that. And I'm curious, Yvonne and Tom, if you've encountered that at all. And if you have any thoughts around, are there particular genres that might be more applicable to?
I have encountered it. I've heard about it. I've heard people thinking that's the way they're going to go and not do the print. I think it's a mistake. I think that especially with novels, here's the thing with novels, especially, you're not going to make any money as a writer if you don't have a series of books. And so you're creating this series of books, and people like to have the series. So if they can have the series as audio, but somehow it's easier if they have the print book on the shelf to go back and look at something. We always say the second book sells the first book. So there's that also. But the other thing is, we like to talk about the Taylor Swift model of marketing. And so you want to engage with your readers. And I don't think there are enough people at this point to prefer audiobooks over print or ebook to make it worthwhile to just go to audio. But I have heard that there are people out there doing it.
I assume that this Jess Walter is doing this from his personal experience on sales of his books, because if you look at the industry averages, you're leaving almost 80% of your potential sales on the table if you don't have a print book.
Yeah, when I was thinking about it, I was thinking in the context of if you were an established author and it was a brand building exercise, almost an extra thank you to your loyal readers. Go to my website and you can download this audio file of whatever the collection might be.
Yeah.
But I was thinking more that in the nonfiction realm, that might have more relevance in the sense that for that audience that wants to listen to the book by an established leader in some field, that they can listen to the entirety of it in 90 minutes or in 3 hours or something of that nature. But it just feels like it's another possible path.
I think that you're right, Michael. However, even when we're talking about these big name authors, they hold book signings. They have, excuse me, I have a cat. They have the ability, much more so than the little guy, to go out there and engage with their readers. I tell you, a signed book, doesn't matter whether you're famous or not, a signed book, people love it. People just want to eat it up. So I would be reluctant to say, just do audio. There's no connection, real good connection. It's useful, but we were looking at Brandon Sanderson, his website. He's a fantasy writer. And my gosh, he invented a book club about his books and his series. So he's got his readers doing videos of meetings in book clubs to help promote his books. And that's the Taylor Swift model. You need to be doing that. And then he participates. And these are people that bring the print book and hold it up to the camera. Hold it. You can't hold up an audiobook to the camera.
So build your platform, know who your audience is, regardless of whether you want to narrate your own book or hire someone to do it. Know who that audience is, know who you want that character to be, whether it's nonfiction or fiction, so that they can tell the story in the best way, the most human and empathetic way. I wish we had more time, but we don't.
Yeah.
You guys are great. It's always incredible. Tom and Yvonne and Michael and Sherry, I thank you all. And John, thanks for giving us the space to put on our little show.
It's a great topic, and the expertise around the table is clear. The questions and answers that came through the chat also demonstrated that the group here is a resource for each other. And if anybody who's here or watches this doesn't know which way to go, then they're not paying attention, because it was efficient and clear and understandable. So thank you very much, all of you.
No, thanks, John.
Thank you.
Demystifying so much of this. Cool.
Real nice to meet you all.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks for joining us,
Yep,
Michael.
thanks to everybody.